22. Can I get a roll call, please?
Mr. Kurtz.
Here.
Mr. Sherlock. Here. Mr. Natali, I am here. Mr. Mercado.
Here.
Mr. Bowman. Mr. Dawson. Mr. Carderas. Mr. Salmat.
Here.
Mr. Tedisco.
Here.
Ms. Blake. Ms. Downs.
Here.
Mr. Hilsinger. We have a quorum.
Great. Will Commission and public please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, our only order of business tonight is Strathmore Holdings, so can we hear the call for 1, 2, and 3, please?
The zone map change petition of Strathmore Holdings LLC, care of Bernard Pellegrino Esquire, the Pellegrino Law Firm, 475 Whitney Avenue, New Haven, Connecticut, 06511, to change from present R40 zone to affordable housing development to construct 56-unit affordable housing development pursuant to Section 44A of the zoning regulations. Property located at 64-69-74-80-0. Give some feedback. East Mitchell Avenue, Cheshire, Connecticut, is generally shown on Assessor's Map number 57 and 58. Lots numbers 261, 269, 270, 271, and 2. Property description available for review in Planning Office and filed in the Town Clerk's Office. Number 2, the special permit application of Strathmore Holdings LLC, care of Bernard Pellegrino Esquire, the Pellegrino Law Firm, 475 Whitney Avenue, New Haven, Connecticut, 06511. For proposed development of a 56-unit affordable housing development property located at 64, 69, 74, 80, 0 East Mitchell Avenue, Cheshire, Connecticut, 06410, is generally shown on Assessor's Maps numbers 57 and 58. Lots numbers 261, 269, 270, 271, and 2 in an existing R40 zone, proposed AHD zone. Number 3, the re-subdivision modification of Strathmore Holdings LLC, care of Bernard Pellegrino Esquire, the Pellegrino Law Firm, 475 Whitney Avenue, New Haven, Connecticut, 06511, for a one-lot re-subdivision modification property located on East Mitchell Avenue, Cheshire, Connecticut, 06410, as generally shown on Assessor's Maps number 57 and 58, lots numbers 261, 269, 270, 271, and 2 in an existing R40 zone and proposed AHD zone.
Thank you. I'd like to announce that our recording secretary is not here tonight. She's doing it via Zoom. So if we could have everyone clearly state their name and their address for the record when they speak. If it's a tough one, you could spell your name for her. That would be great. And with that, I'll give you the floor. Sure.
And just for the record, for Maryland, Mr. Dawson and Mr. Carderas are not here.
Great. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. For the record, I'm Bernard Pellegrino. I'm an attorney with the Pellegrino Law Firm, 475 Whitney Avenue, New Haven, Connecticut. Thank you for having us this evening. We're back. This public hearing has been continued a few times since we opened it on January 11th. And I think when we were last together, there were 2 issues that we're here to address tonight. One was an independent peer review of our traffic report, which I'm sure you've received. And Mr. Sullivan will address that. And the issue of a sidewalk running from the project up East Mitchell to Route 10, which we have agreed to provide. And Mr. McAvoy will show you that addition to the plan. And obviously, if anyone has any other additional questions, we're happy to address those as well. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to the other members of our team. You want to go first? Yeah.
For the record, my name is Ryan McAvoy. I'm a licensed professional engineer with SLR Consulting. Just very briefly, the comment letter we received from your consulting engineer included a few questions about clarification on what we had changed to the plans since they had reviewed it during the wetlands application. And we highlighted those changes on the plans, which primarily are landscaping in nature, some sidewalk connections to the cul-de-sac extension of East Mitchell Avenue, water main extensions, hydrant placement, And I'd say most critically, perhaps based on discussions with the commission, comments from the police chief, is the inclusion of a sidewalk connection that will run on the south side of East Mitchell Avenue. This map has orientation with north to the right, Route 10 on the top of the sheet. Our sidewalk will run along our side of the road and prior to the Cheshire Hillside Village driveway, which is just to the west of our site. We will cross on the east side of the road, so it won't interfere with any traffic from Cheshire Hillside Village. And then the sidewalk will continue along the north side of East Mitchell Avenue, terminating at a handicap accessible ramp along Highland Avenue. And this was, again, a sidewalk that was added based on consideration from comments from the commission, comments from the chief of police, and we've incorporated those into the plans. We did also provide updated turning template movements of the Cheshire Ladder fire truck, showing that the vehicle has accessibility around the entire site. So that is a brief summary of the plan changes that you have before you. Unless there's any questions related to those, I'd like to turn it over to Dave Sullivan to discuss some of the traffic-related items.
Mr. Mercado.
Since a lot of the concerns about the sidewalks and the buses and the children were that road ices up and cars slide down it. I've been down there. It's not a safe road. Why would you have the kids cross the street and move the sidewalk from the south to the north after the entrance of the?
Well, a couple of
Looks
reasons. The first is if you may recall, going on East Mitchell, there is a pretty substantial slope along the south side of East Mitchell Avenue, that a sidewalk along that portion of the road would require excavation, retaining walls, and easements along the property owner to the south. The property on the north side of East Mitchell Avenue is relatively flat and can incorporate a sidewalk without any significant constructability issues or obtaining any rights to do so. And we chose to put the sidewalk along our side of East Mitchell Avenue rather than on the opposite side. Again, just because constructability issues on our side of the street, and also, we were aware that the neighbor across the street had concerns about any construction of the right-of-way within or adjacent to their property. So we thought it was prudent to have the sidewalk along our side of the development and the crosswalk location in a location where it wouldn't interfere with Cheshire Hillside Village traffic. So that was the logic we applied.
So all the town's easement or access is all to the north. There's nothing to the south.
I'm sorry, you talking about the town's right of way?
The right of way. There's none to the south.
There is, but there's a substantial 3 or 4 foot slope right along the edge of the curb that constructing the sidewalk there would require activity on the southerly property, which we
That's
don't have.
also the back and side of a business, whereas on the north side is half of someone's front yard or a big chunk of their front yard. And you're putting the ownership of all that shoveling and everything else on them, where if you kept it on the south side, dug up a little bit,
This
safer.
I don't believe that this is an active business. I believe it was a home occupation, somebody that had a home photography business, but it is a residence, similarly to what's on the other side of the road. Again, we added the sidewalk after hearing the feedback from the commission, from the chief of police, and we placed the sidewalk in a location that we thought was most appropriate, given the topography, given the site conditions along the East Mitchell right-of-way, and also with respect to the portion of the road that the applicant has control over.
I just feel it's less obtrusive on the south side for that property owner than it is for the front yard with a small front yard of the person on the north, and it still would be continuous and not cross a slippery road. I feel you should move it to the south side. Moving a little bit of dirt is no big deal.
I believe it would require more than dirt to require getting access rights to that property owner. Just because of the grade, the town right-of-way is not consistent with typical grading standards where you have a shoulder where you could construct a sidewalk. The northerly side has that condition. In addition, there is currently a bus stop for the property owner on the north side, right at the northwest corner of the intersection with Highland Avenue. So it would be consistent with where the buses stop today to pick up kids who live in this area.
I mean, if the bus is stopping there, it's blocking the road, so it's safe. So it wouldn't matter which side of the road if you continued that up. But I would, you know what I feel about this. Thank you.
Mr. Natale.
Randy, I got a few questions for you. So the affected property owners, were they informed either by the town, or Michael, either by the town or by the applicant that this is being proposed in their, I know it's in the town right away, but in their front yards?
No,
Will there be a curbing installed? And is there going to be a concrete sidewalk? Will there be any curbing installed?
no,
No.
we're not proposing any curbing.
So the water from the road is going to go on the sidewalk and, as Mr. Mercado said, create ice for these
No,
kids to walk on?
The water runs along the gutter line or the edge of pavement presently today. Our sidewalk will be elevated slightly above that, so the water will continue to go exactly where it does today.
Okay. And the semantics, developer is going to install this or the town?
The developer.
Okay. How about the utilities? Right before this meeting, I took a ride down the street. I wanted to see what telephone poles, fire hydrants, mailboxes, bushes. And I don't know, based on the town's easement, where that sidewalk is going to go without moving the telephone poles and relocating them, and the bushes and the mailboxes and any other possible utilities there.
We won't have to relocate any utility poles. There may have to be some trimming of some bushes, again, only within the town right away. We're not seeking any activity beyond the town right away, which would be absolutely necessary if we were going to put on the other
So
side
you're
of the
going to
road.
put the telephone poles on the north, I'm sorry, the sidewalk on the north side of the telephone poles?
No, the sidewalk will go between the telephone pole in one location and the road.
So
And
then
then
it
on
won't
the-
be a standard width sidewalk, because that's, honestly, it's like 3 feet, if that.
It won't be it will be a standard width sidewalk. It will vary somewhat along the edge of the right of way, again, to avoid some of the existing utilities in the area.
Will the full length be the standard width required by the town?
Yes.
Let's see, all the crosswalk markings and everything.
Pavement
we put
markings
in
are shown.
Per state statute?
Yes.
And let's see, there's a question about the cul-de-sac. I don't remember this, and we might have talked about it already, but where's the snow going to go?
Well, there's plenty of opportunity along the entire back edge of the cul-de-sac to push snow. There's no obstructions or activity located along the whole end of the cul-de-sac. So this is plenty of opportunity to store snow from the proposed cul-de-sac extension.
Okay. And have you talked to Public Works yet?
No. But again, our configuration, the town standard for a subdivision at least, allows for up to 3 driveways on a cul-de-sac. We're providing 2 driveways along with the entire backside of the cul-de-sac available for snow storage. And keep in mind, there's no cul-de-sac today.
But
So today,
have you talked to I'm sorry, I'm going to go back to the sidewalk. Have you talked to Public Works about the sidewalk?
about the sidewalk,
Yeah.
no.
So Public Works hasn't been spoken to, and the neighbors who are going to get this sidewalk don't know about it.
No,
Unless they're here.
This is something that we've added at the request of members of the commission and the chief of
Right, but
police.
2 weeks ago when we had our meeting, we got a packet with this information. So over the past 2 weeks, nobody's reached out to these neighbors.
No.
That's neighborly. Probably have a couple more questions. I'll let you go.
Mr. Tedesco.
Mr. McAvoy, I read something in the materials we got about, in the winter, the development being responsible or might be responsible for shoveling the sidewalk. Has anything been discussed on that?
Of shoveling the sidewalk.
When it snows? I mean, we're gonna have a sidewalk up the street now. Neighbors don't know about it. They didn't plan for it. Whether they want to be coming out and shoveling the sidewalk is, I'm not sure if they would want to do that. But I thought I read something about, there was some discussion about the project handling the maintenance of the sidewalk during winter storms. Can you add to that?
In terms of the applicant and the future owners of this,
Yes.
control, maintain
Doing
the
shovel-
sidewalk?
When it snows, is the applicant going to shovel the sidewalk?
Well, obviously, we'll be responsible for our sidewalk. I think I'd have to have a discussion with them about whether they'd be willing to take on maintenance of the sidewalk in front of other people's properties. I know town ordinance requires individual property owners to maintain the sidewalk in front of their properties. So I can't commit to that right now, but I'm happy to have the discussion with the applicant.
Maybe I could comment on that because it was in my staff report. I know that this commission has asked for applicants in the past, which they agreed to. It's to maintain an off-site improvement. I put it in there as a suggestion to ask of the applicant. It's kind of outside of your jurisdiction. They would have to agree to it, but it's just a thought. You have had other applicants in the past that have agreed to maintain a similar feature sidewalk that was constructed. So just as, I mean, they have to agree to it. It's not something, I think you really have a lot of jurisdiction to force them on maintaining it, but that would be up to the applicant.
I understand that we don't have, the commission doesn't have jurisdiction to require that. We do have jurisdiction, though, I think, to make sure that there's a safe way for kids to get to the bus stop. And if that's part of making sure kids can get to the buses safely, that's something the applicant might want to consider. The applicant's taken a big step by offering to put the sidewalk in at all. I mean, I think I acknowledge that. I think that's a big move. It's something that doesn't typically happen. It's a little disappointing that the applicant hasn't addressed it with the town or the neighbors at all yet. But I mean, I do understand that it's a real step the applicant's taken toward improving its situation by doing this. But I think the snow removal and some discussion with the town and the neighbors would have been advisable.
Mr. Natale.
Yep, sorry, remember my last question. Michael, you may know the answer to this. Ryan, you may. Are there any requirements from the state besides the ADA accessible ramp to get any kind of approval, since the sidewalk will end on a state road?
It will require an encroachment permit with the DOT.
Oh, what? I didn't hear that. I'm sorry.
An encroachment permit
Encroachment
with the DOT.
Is that because of the state's right away?
Correct.
Okay.
But that's just with the district office, not with Newington.
Okay, but
Yeah.
they still have to get approved.
They still will need approval for anything in the state right away.
Commission members, any other questions? Okay, I guess we'll go to the traffic report.
Good evening. Again, for the record, I'm David Sullivan. I'm with SLR, manager of the Transportation Planning Group, professional engineer. Since the earlier hearings, there have been comments provided by your peer review, by the police department. We subsequently have provided responses to those comments. Ryan talked about some of them. I'll talk a little bit about the traffic-related ones. Really, there were 4 all told that I think fell into the traffic realm that had any type of substantive response. One you talked about with Ryan with the school bus, and we did have a conversation with the police chief on that particular thing. The only thing I'll add is on the crosswalk and the concern of there being ice or snow on the road. During those times, you're not going to have school children walking because school will likely be canceled at those times. So, it would be a confluence of poor maintenance, enough snow to make it icy, but not enough snow to cancel school, or delay school. So it's not something I would be overly concerned about. The other couple of items that were addressed were the trip generation estimates. There was a question about where they came from, and we did provide some backup data. They were from the Institute of Transportation Engineers, their publication Trip Generation, and that's where we get most of our estimates on projects such as this or many other projects. So we provided that information. Sightlines was another question. There was a little bit of confusion in the question. We did provide information on sightlines from the driveway, not from East Mitchell onto Route 10. So we explained that, but then we also provided in the follow-up response the sightlines at Route 10 from East Mitchell, compared those to the average, the posted in the 85th percentile speeds, provided a sightline plan, and we meet the requirements for those sightlines as well as the sightlines from the driveway onto East Mitchell. So those 3 were fully vetted, and in the Wright Pierce response letter, they were satisfactorily responded to. The one comment
response that they had some follow-up comments on had to do with the bypass geometry on Route 10. And to give you a little background, there was, the initial discussion was if somebody's turning into East Mitchell to take a left turn, is there enough room for southbound vehicles to get by them? And in the same comment, if somebody was going northbound at Hinman, would they be blocking traffic in the northbound direction? Not necessarily an issue of this particular project, but we looked at both of them, and the width and the shoulders are quite wide through there. And we indicated that in our response. And the Wright Pierce review of our response said, the lanes out there, the travel lanes are actually about 14 feet. And what that means is they're so wide that if a car wants to drive on the right side of that lane, you're only leaving about 6 or 7 feet for the bypass. And so we went out there, we looked at it, we measured it, and in fact, they were correct. There is, the lane is wider than it really needs to be. So what we're recommending tonight is that we'll work with DOT on the striping through there. We looked at it, it's a minor restriping of the shoulder line to narrow the lanes to make a wider shoulder so the bypass is a little more obvious to drivers primarily in the southbound direction. Very little needs to be done in the northbound direction. But again, we'll work, as we go through the encroachment permit, we'll work with DOT and get their permission to do that. So that's really it. Again, the Wright Pierce, that was the only comment they had outstanding from our reviews. So that being said.
Mr. Brocato.
Can I add one thing? I just want to touch back on my testimony from before. When the question was asked, do we coordinate with the Department of Public Works? And the answer to that is actually yes. We did work through their consultant engineer, Wright Pierce, who did review our plans, did review the sidewalk location, and didn't have any comment related to the proposed sidewalk location. So I said we didn't, but we worked through their consultant on the matter.
Okay, Mr.
So
Brocato.
two things back to that. When you walk through their consultant, do they know that you were working with their consultant or you?
All their correspondence was to George Nowotny, the Director of Public Works.
Now back on the traffic. You said you went and looked at this, you looked at all, the travel, how many cars go by, but did anybody go out there and time the turn times? Because I know they could be ridiculously long, especially turning left out of East Mitchell.
We did, and back in January, we did some observations of how much time actually it takes for people to take the left turns and the right turns.
And that was during rush hour and non-rush hour and weekend times?
Correct. And then we correlated those findings to the analysis results, and they were pretty close to the analysis results. We provided it in a January 21st letter that you should have from an earlier hearing.
Okay.
And just for the commissions, so our consulting engineer at Wright Pierce reviewed the initial traffic study, the supplemental, and the third version that's in your packet. And just to quote Larry, I don't want to butcher his last name, Rosinski, as requested, I've reviewed the revised application materials and SLR response letter. In general, they've addressed all of the items within. So all the traffic concerns, they're in agreement, our traffic engineer and what was been provided from SLR.
Sure, Mrs. Downs.
Actually, Michael, this might be more for you. It says on the special permit, the commission may want to consider a condition that the sidewalk be constructed and approved by the town of Cheshire prior to the issuance of a building permit for the development. Does that mean that they would pay for that or the town would pay for that? What are you saying?
So they're proposing the sidewalk, they pay for the construction costs. What basically, since the sidewalk was a major issue with the commission,
Absolutely.
the suggestion is that no building permits are issued for the development until that sidewalk is approved, constructed, and accepted by the town of Cheshire. So that protects the commission's interest. DPW also would be involved in that sense of approving and accepting that sidewalk layout.
But,
So-
but the developer
At the
would
developer's
construct.
cost, they
Okay.
pay for it.
So Michael,
And, and that's something that we can ask?
Yes.
Okay.
That could, so that could be, it should, after the public hearing closed, you could put a condition on that, which have discussed that with the applicant, and they are in agreement with that condition.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Natak.
So Michael, along those lines then, since we just learned by asking the question about the state DOT, could that be added there also that until they get that encroachment permit, the building permits cannot be?
Thought I
Issue?
had something in there about DOT. Hold on, I'm sorry. So the applicant is responsible for securing approvals with CTDOT for any work within the state right-of-way along Route 10. Applicant shall provide copies of any approvals from CTDOT if
And that's
necessary.
prior to the building permit.
Yes.
Or
Well,
any-
If
any
we
building
want to
permit.
put
Well,
it
we-
into it,
If we
if we
want,
want to put it into the.
Yeah,
to the motion.
you can tie that together.
And as far as again, Ryan, with the sidewalk, if it's going to be basically at level, you said maybe a little sloped. How is I mean, I don't know about plowing, but how are the plow guys going to know where the sidewalk ends, where the street ends?
Well,
They
right
don't
now,
know now.
there's a
Well,
landscape
there's no
strip.
curb, so.
There's no curb today. And right now, the plows operate in that street. They maintain it. Our sidewalk is going to be removed from the edge of the pavement with a landscape strip. There are instances all over town where you have curbless roads with sidewalks. Now it's sort of a more modern iteration of your subdivision regulations where a road requires curbs and sidewalks, but there are plenty of examples in town where conditions like this exist. And the town would continue plowing the road as they do today.
Gotcha. So, but you just said that there's going to be the landscaping strip also?
Grass strip, yes.
So you're going to have the grass strip and the sidewalk fit on the south side of those telephone poles?
Yeah,
Without encroaching onto the road?
that's right. The sidewalk will not abut the paved portion of the road. There'll be a separation of landscaping between the two.
So what I would suggest to the commission is just, we've heard that it's all within this town right-of-way. So if it goes onto private property, it's not consistent with your approval.
Okay.
So when
And
they.
it has to meet town
It has
standards.
to meet town standards, which they've agreed to. You're protected in the sense, if it's in the right of way, that's where our authority is to say yes. Once it goes on a private property, one, I would
It
say
needs
that's a
permission.
modification of your approval.
Yeah.
They'd have to come back. And two, they'd have to get a permission for whomever's property that this encroaches onto. So you're protected in that sense. And it's in their best interest probably to do some survey layout before they get their approvals from DPW to go ahead to install this thing. And also just briefly too, if DPW says we want a curb, since you're in your motion in this, they're reviewing and approving it, they could add a curb to this.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
for the record, again, Bernie Pellegrino, two things. One is that I discussed with Mr. Fisk the willingness of the developer to maintain the sidewalk on the other side of the street as it goes to Whitney Avenue. They would agree to do so voluntarily.
Wow.
Number one. Number two, on the building permit, and Mike and I did have.
Just remember to grab the microphone because Marilyn's at home, so.
On the installation of the sidewalk prior to the issuance of a building permit, we would agree, but I would ask that for the portion of the sidewalk that's going to be on the construction site, that be done after the building permit, but prior to the CO, because this is going to be an active construction site where we're going to need to access the building. So we would be happy to build the off-site sidewalk prior to the issuance of the building permit. But for the stretch that goes from our property to the cul-de-sac, again, because of construction activities in the site where the sidewalk would obviously be damaged if
Be
we
also be
installed it first, we would ask for some consideration that for that stretch of sidewalk, it come prior to the issuance of a CO so that it wasn't damaged after we put it in. Now we got to do it again.
I think that's reasonable because before you have anyone living there, the sidewalk is kind
Nobody's
of,
gonna
no
use-
point to have the
Yeah,
sidewalk. 'cause you
nobody's
won't be
going to use
walking on
that
it.
section until we get this building
Is
up and
that
running.
something we could throw in, change for,
So I actually, in the suggested motion in the approval would be that it's the tying the building permit specifically to the off-site sidewalk.
and that would be
And
considered
that would be
on-site?
considered on-site, so that we're in agreement on that. I'm more concerned with making sure the off-site improvements which have been agreed to by the applicant are installed in a timely manner before building permits are issued, because if there's an issue and the sidewalk can't proceed, well then, they don't get a building permit to pursue with the development. And then the last thing is just, you've heard the applicant agree to the maintenance of the sidewalk.
We would need something.
We would like this, staff is suggesting to you that this is part of an executed agreement that's filed on the land records. You've done this in the past, and with the approval of town council. So we'd have to, meeting the town attorney, we would draft something. Jeff D'Onofrio will sign off on it. That's executed. It's in the land records, so it's permanent. The commitment here is that they maintain it.
Which is reasonable and acceptable.
That was my question too, so
That's fair, and it's appropriate.
off-site, we can't make you do, but if there's an agreement, then we're fine. I'm fine. I don't know about the rest of the board.
Yep, we're okay with that.
Okay, if you have no further testimony, I'm going to go to the public and let the public speak. Anyone from the public wishing to speak on this application? Sure, just need you to come up to the microphone up here, and we need your name and address for the record. Yeah, same as them.
I'm Val Castro. I live at Cheshire Hillside Village. So my question is
we need the address.
377 East Mitchell.
Thank you.
My question is about parking on East Mitchell. Right now, there's no parking. There's no parking signs. But I haven't gone by any school when children are getting out, and there's always a line of cars where parents are picking up their children. So if you want small children walking from Route 10 down to the development, are parents in inclement weather going to be parked all around East Mitchell? Because that's really small and kind of dangerous. And the other question I have is there's streams and wetlands back there. So do we know what the sources are for those streams and ponds and wetlands? Is that protected?
Yeah,
Stream-
I believe they have
wetlands?
they have wetlands approval also.
Yeah,
already for,
they did approve it, but I didn't know what the sources of that water is. There's a lot of natural wildlife back there too. That'll be displaced. So those are the two considerations I thought of.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else from the public wishing to speak?
John Esposito, 383 East Mitchell Avenue. I didn't quite understand why you're splitting the sidewalk. It made no sense to me. So you're going to have children safely walk up one side of the street, cross the street, and then walk up the other side. Could somebody at least give me an idea why? It didn't make sense from sitting back there.
Yeah, do you have any other questions? He did give a brief answer. They can give the answer again, but did you have any other questions before? If you want to get other-
Okay. And the second question is, I guess a couple of weeks ago when I was up here, I can't imagine 236 families living on a road that's less than a quarter mile long. And you don't anticipate with all your traffic studies that you're going to have a major problem with this thing on Route 10. There's only one way in and one way out. And that is a congested area. Try to get out of, not East Mitchell Avenue, Eastgate, and take a left at about 4:30 in the afternoon. That's the only two questions I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You want to address those two now while they're hot on the plate?
I'll address the question specifically about the sidewalks. Again, the logic that we applied is twofold. One is that our sidewalk along our side of the south side of East Mitchell Avenue is placed in proximity to on-site residential units. What we expect only people using this portion of the sidewalk will be from the proposed development. And then prior to the Cheshire Hillside Village driveway, we'll have a crosswalk striped across East Mitchell Avenue with the sidewalk on the north side. Again, as it relates to the right-of-way itself today, where that side can more suitably support a sidewalk without encroaching on neighboring property owners in order to construct it. That's the logic. And in terms of the traffic, I believe if Dave wants to address that, but our traffic studies, traffic analysis, traffic estimates are all based on site data and based on standard estimation for developments like this.
You have to come up to the mic, though. I'm sorry. You can't just blurt out questions, especially with our secretary at home.
Annette Belcastro again. The traffic studies are based on the traffic today, but when you have all those units, you're going to have all that additional traffic coming up East Mitchell, and it's impossible to anticipate that. I'm assuming if 56 units, each unit is going to have 2 cars, so that's a lot more traffic up East Mitchell than we have now.
Mr. Esposito, did you have a question too? I saw your hand fire up. You know what, we need to get it on the record, and I'm sorry, something that the rules I have to follow. The rules is the rules.
Are you going to have to plan for a crossing guard at this location where they're going to cross over?
On Mitchell Avenue?
No, on East Mitchell Avenue. I mean, if you do have, say, 15, 20 grammar school kids that are going to cross over with the sidewalk split, does the town have to supply a crossing guard? That's my question to you.
I don't know if you guys knows the answer to that. I believe Route 10 always has a crossing guard.
Yeah, Route
next
10
to a
does,
school,
yes.
But it's not a private road for
Okay, so that doesn't apply to a
I mean,
private road.
there's roads all over this town where, I mean, you'd have
No, I grant you
you'd have
that. yeah.
crosswalk people everywhere if that was the case, if you ever had to cross.
And I do have one other thing I'd like to run by is, can you make that East Mitchell Avenue a right turn only, or is that impossible? When you're leaving,
When you're exiting, you mean?
when you're exiting. That would avoid a lot of problems, and I don't question the engineers, but I do question their time studies. And that's all I really have then.
But I don't know if we're within our authority to.
No, there'd be the local traffic authority would have that authority. That's the chief of police.
Yeah.
The
And
residents.
he had a report and didn't
Yeah.
say that. So
You have two traffic engineers that didn't point that out as a condition that needed to be addressed by saying right turn only. So, I mean, at this point, the only avenue I would see is that, everyone who lives on East Mitchell would have to petition the local traffic authority to make that change, which through statute, he holds a hearing, everyone's notified, and then he also has to get approval from OSTA to do that. So, I mean, it's kind of a lift, and it's really an LTA thing, not so much this commission.
okay, thank you. Anyone else? I'm sorry. Come on to the mic.
My name is Dee LaDonna. I live at 445 East Mitchell Avenue. This really isn't a question. It's just something I would like everybody up there to maybe keep in mind. There was a project turned down just a few weeks ago that only had, I think it was 8 units right next to Stonegate by Route 42 and 10.
That actually wasn't an application. That was a zone change that was turned down. We never
Oh.
saw an application for that. So
Oh,
that's
okay.
it.
I thought it was turned down due to traffic.
It was the zone change was actually
Okay.
turned down.
All right.
So thank you. That's okay. Anyone else from the public wishing to speak? Sure, come on up.
My name is Dolores Anicelli, 477 East Mitchell Avenue. My question is, when it's time for the people to bring their children down to get the bus, which we know they're going to drive down Mitchell Avenue, and they're going to park, they're going to let their children out. Their children are going to go to Route 10 and get the bus. The people that want to go back up to their apartments, how do they make a turn to go back?
Go back when you, oh, you
To
mean
go
after they
back
drop
to
off
their- They drop off their children.
they would have to take a right on or a left onto Route 10, turn around somewhere and come back. Unless you can make it legal, I just,
They can't make the turn.
they can go
on-
straight out of the neighborhood. It's not a turn. It's an illegal turn, I would say, if somebody was to do that.
So how, you mean they're gonna have to go down to Route 10 when they're parked for their children to get the bus? What you're saying is they have to go to Route 10, make a right or a left, and go around and come back in?
What I'm saying is I don't know what they would do, but there is no provision for them to spin around and head back down East Mitchell Avenue, if that's the question you're asking.
Yeah,
It's just that, well, that they're breaking the law if they're doing
yes,
that.
they are, but you know that they're gonna want to go back to their apartment after they drop off their children. So they're gonna go to Route 10. What you're telling me is that, I'm sorry, I'm not a public speaker. I'm not an attorney. What you're saying, they have to go to Route 10, either go right or go left and go around and then come back in.
They can't back up, right? And they can't, it's a town road. They have to follow town roads.
Yes. So it's not,
They can also have their children walk too.
Yeah, but there was a traffic study too.
What are the kids?
That's a police issue.
They're right.
Yeah, I mean,
Actually, Mr. Chairman, so what they're talking about, it would be a police issue. So if it causes an issue where it's not supposed to be parking in East Mitchell, you call the police. Police come out, tell them no more. So, I mean, it's really outside of your jurisdiction. Your jurisdiction.
I'm not
limited
arguing
to
with you. I'm just
safe
saying
access.
it's an illegal action if that's what they're trying to do. We can't approve or deny an application on an illegal action that might happen. It's not our decision that way.
when these children are going to catch the bus, is there going to be a police officer doing traffic because there's no traffic light? There's nothing there. Right?
There's no traffic light, no.
No. So is a police officer going to be on duty to make sure that these children are safe when they're catching the bus?
I would have to say no. I mean, there's a police officer on duty. Is he going to be at that area? No. I mean, have there been kids that grew up on that street before?
I have
Had
nothing
kids?
more. Thanks.
You're asking me.
Mr. Chairman,
This
just
is
maybe to
crazy.
clarify, you'd have a bus that's on Route 10 picking someone up. The lights are on, so if someone were to drive by it, it's 4 points on your license, which is a police matter. It's really outside of the jurisdiction of this commission. You have two traffic engineers who've agreed to that it's the safe situation, so just,
And the police, chief of police.
and the chief of police, also your local traffic authority, so.
Sure. Come on up, please.
Annette Belcastro. Once the sidewalks are in, is the street going to be wide enough to accept two-way traffic?
The sidewalks should not affect the width of the street as it is now.
Okay.
Anyone else from the public wishing to speak? Okay. Do you have any closing remarks you'd like to make, Mr. Pellegrino?
My experience was when I dropped the kids off at the bus stop, I then went to work. So I don't know if is true, that everybody would have to come back to the site. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I mentioned, when we opened this public hearing on January 11th, our client was committed to bringing forward a project that was compliant with your regulation, Section 44A, to develop a project for moderately priced, affordable housing in town. This project is compliant with the letter and intent of the regulation. And it's in a location within 500 feet of Route 10, which is one of the only 6 roads in the regulation which you permit such projects. In bringing the project forward, our client looked to advance one of the goals of your 2016 Plan of Conservation and Development, which was to raise the availability of affordable housing in town and in the suburban areas of the region where there is a significant need for it. Your regulation, Section 45A, .5, .1 states that the commission shall approve a petition seeking the creation of an affordable housing district unless the denial of the petition is necessary to protect substantial public interest in health, safety, or other matters which you may legally consider, which substantial public interests clearly outweigh the need for affordable housing. And such public interest could not be otherwise protected by reasonable changes in the petition. And you've asked for changes in the petition since we started on January 11th. And I think the record shows that in each and every instance, this developer heard those concerns, those requests, and has brought them forward for your consideration. The fear of change or issues of inconvenience are not sufficient reasons for a denial as you designed this regulation. The regulation was adopted by you for the good of the town. And we look forward respectfully to your approval of all of the applications that we've submitted. And we appreciate your time and effort. And thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I don't believe we're not going to vote on this tonight. There's a couple of things that came in tonight. I think we just want to digest it a little bit. I am going to close the public hearing, but it will be something that we want to make sure about the sidewalk and what all the agreements and everything. That's not that really matters, but it's something that we're not gonna take up tonight. We just think we all just need to digest it a little bit and take it on our next meeting. But I will be closing the public hearing, and thanks everybody. With that, can I entertain a motion to adjourn, please? Moved by Mr. Cordero, seconded by Mr. Dawson. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All right, moving on, I'd like to call to order the regular meeting for Monday, March 28th, 2022. I give everybody a second here to clear the room.
Okay.
Hey, Ryan, can you take that out in the hallway if you don't mind? Just to keep it a little quieter in here. Okay, moving on. Can I get a motion to accept the minutes from the special meeting we had on March 14th, 2022?
Yes, motion to approve the minutes from March 14th, 2022 for the special meeting.
Moved by Mr. Talley, second by Mr. Bricato. Discussion or corrections on the minutes? Sensing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? Motion carries unanimously. Under communications, we have a letter from Town Manager Kimball.
That's for the 824 referral, which is associated with the re-subdivision
So we'll
application.
just-
So I would ask that.
We'll
let's hold
take
it
it
off.
all up on the next meeting?
Yeah.
Okay. All unfinished business, boom, boom, boom.
Mr. Chairman, you just have one other communication. You have a zoning enforcement report from
Oh,
Mike
that's right.
Strollo.
That's right.
Now, this is a really brief one, but we want to make sure, if you like it brief, we'll keep it the same way. If you want more details on stuff, he will add it. And we also want to talk to the commission on frequency. How often do you want Mike to prepare a report?
Yeah, this is something that some of you might remember. We had this every once in a while, and it's kind of nice because what's that? We used to get it monthly, and I found sometimes in town someone will say, "Hey, what's going on with this? What's going on with that?" And we don't know about it because it's a violation of something, and town staff takes care of it just like they should. But it's kind of nice. I remember when we had it before, and we talked about bringing it back, and
So this was just really brief. Mike hit on the larger items that we're dealing with. If you want more detail, like for example, how many building permits have been issued for some of the subdivisions? How many COs have been issued? We can get that with the new building permit software. That's easy. That's right at our fingertips. But also the level of detail for some of the enforcement cases. For example, you have in there, I apologize. You have the issue, let's give an example being Weiss Road, the dam maintenance was a condition of approval that was brought to our attention, which the developer is addressing. And, we reminded them the condition of approval from this commission that they need to address this prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. So they have 2 houses under construction right now. We put them on notice that we need a report on that dam, and if there's any repairs that are required, they need to be completed prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. So it's items like that we will always put on that list, but that's just kind of highlighting some of the things to make sure that, for example, condition of approval does not fall through the cracks.
So any updates or changes or additions we want, do that now or through email? Or?
Why don't you email me directly? No, don't CC the entire commission so that I can talk to Mike about it, so we don't violate FOI, and then we'll build upon this. This is version 1, which once we get something that's comfortable, that's what you're going to see on a more regular basis.
And what our last one used to say was things like it would tell us what's going on and then what was done about it, like a letter sent to the applicant. Applicant said yes, resolved, or it's still pending, or something.
I can tell him that
Okay.
that you would like to see that level of detail. That's fine. But
Yeah.
Well, Sean's more of the chicken house guy.
Yeah.
I'm more of the chicken.
So I know the biggest thing I think a report like this will help is what applications have been coming in and denied, not who, not exactly what, but is it supermarkets, is it barbershops, or at gas stations? So when we do POCD, we know what's trying to come into Cheshire and if we can help that. So, knowing, like I said, what's coming in would be advantageous.
I don't think by law, in the application that comes in, he has to accept it by state statute. So he can't just say pick and choose. State statute says he has to receive every application. and
No,
process.
what I'm saying, Woody, is what kind of applications are we getting? So we know what's,
Discussion.
yeah, like
Somebody
how many gas stations, are they supermarkets, are they, what type of,
So they would discuss with him and he would
Right.
share
Well,
with us.
yeah.
what I'll tell Mike is that some of the administrative approvals, that we're going to update that too. Like if there's an administrative approval, you're going to be aware of it. So then you're comfortable with what we're doing. So you know that we're not invoking an administrative approval for just anything under the sun. So yeah, we can include that. But as Woody is correct that, if someone comes in and applies for something and it's applications received either to this commission or to the ZEO, we have to accept it. We don't have to approve it. We just have to accept it.
yeah, it's just nice to know what
Yeah.
type of applicants are coming in.
We can get to that level of detail too. That's not a huge ask.
Like the only other thing I'd like to see, under the zoning violations, I know 2 of these are tied directly to applications that we voted on. Maybe we could separate those.
Okay.
So like the De Janeiro Weiss Road and the tracking of the dirt on Moss Farms Road, that came from us.
Okay.
So maybe, under zoning violations, just put something so, we know what's coming from us versus other
Okay.
zoning violations.
I'll just say project-specific violations. Is that, if you're
That's
okay with that? And then the others are just the run-of-the-mill, like the Wallingford Road one, which is, we're going back to court on. That's just run-of-the-mill zoning enforcement.
This is good. I like this.
So, yeah, we're silent on the chickens. What's the frequency the commission comfortable with Mike preparing this? Do you want to see it maybe every other month, once a week,
Depends on the activity, I would say.
once a month?
What's the activity? Yeah.
Okay, so I'll talk to Mike and we'll figure out which, either the first or second meeting of the month, and say, from now on, moving forward, that's the date that you have to prepare an update of this report.
I just have one question, just about the last item on there. What is that? Several letters issued for transactions of property and new
So,
business.
so we get the banks will require zoning opinion letters, and it's usually very consuming for us to do the research. And, we've seen a few plazas that recently have changed hands, and when that comes up, we're researching all the approvals. We're going out doing an inspection to make sure the conditions of any past approvals were met. And then usually the lender wants to know how the thing was approved, whether it's special permit, site plan, variance, et cetera. And we're providing them those documents.
Are there fees for that? To
Should-
them?
There should be.
Yes.
We're not collecting fees for
Right,
that.
we're doing their work for them.
Yeah, that's one thing
It's not like it's a property owner or a resident. This is,
So both myself and Mike Stroll, and all the other communities I worked for, we charged applicants fees because it's a lot of staff time that's involved in this research. And maybe, I could talk, I think we'd have to go through the council to get
Ordinance
uh,
committee, right?
to get a fee approved. But I mean, if with this commission's backing, we would be glad to start charging a fee for these zoning opinion letters because they're always timely and the closing's always this coming Friday. So.
Okay, thank you. New business, John Romanek Jr. That's next meeting,
That's your-
April.
That'll be a public hearing for the next meeting for 4-plot private cemetery.
Okay, and table the zone text change for the 25th, and we'll start our workshop.
Mike, can you do some research on that cemetery?
Yeah.
I've already started and have some help with it. But you might want to look into it too. It's pretty interesting. Yeah. Yeah, because I told Tim to call you.
The cemetery, let's wait till we take it up. You're gonna bring facts up or what? You bringing facts up or are you just talking about, because it is gonna be a public hearing and I'm not sure. Okay, yeah. All right.
Let- Sean, let's connect after the meeting.
So I would like to know what partial of the property is going to the state took over the building rights on that property. So is the cemetery going to be on specific property that the state took over?
No, it's just a blanket. When they do that, it's a blanket. It cannot, it's still his property. It just can't be developed on.
What I want to understand is, I thought that he bought that property, some of the property was state and the other property he.
I believe it's all,
I don't think it's all.
when Krampus did it, it was all,
I don't remember. I think it was split.
So I'll research that issue for the public hearing. So I think really
On the state property, then we have to get something from the state.
he will have to get something from the state. We would not have to.
it would
that's-
still not be state property. He sold the development rights
well,
for agriculture. You don't sell the
it's-
property, it's just the rights.
Yeah, so then, I've had this experience in the past where someone wanted to propose an activity within an area that was set aside for an agricultural easement. They had to get a release from the commissioner of the Department of Agriculture, but that onus is on that applicant or the landowner. So, but I can research what was sold and what was not.
Yeah, like I said, if the state allows it.
Too late, the bodies are already there.
No, they're not.
Aren't they? Aren't they not?
No.
Where they got them then?
All right, we're gonna hear it at our next meeting. It's frozen. All right. So Mike has prepared a little discussion point for our
Yeah,
affordable housing.
so this is just to kind of cue it up. just so that, oh, I don't know, it looks like we don't have anyone from the public, but just so it's recorded, this is just a quick intro to why we have to do the affordable housing. The affordable housing plan is required under Connecticut General State Statutes 830J. Each community has to develop a plan that shows how they want to develop and promote affordable housing and how they're actually going to increase their numbers. The law requires that these plans are updated every 5 years. I'm going to go through this briefly because I know it's late. Just it's in your plan, but just as a repeat for people watching at home right now, affordable housing, why is affordable housing plan important? There's several reasons such as economic security, ability to age in place, education opportunities, economic development, housing stability, and health. And our plan kind of outlines why these principles are important and why affordable housing contributes to these factors. If anyone has any comments or questions, please interrupt me. So Cheshire is a community that we are subject to the following. 830G of the General State Statutes is the Affordable Housing Appeals Act. Basically, it says every community in Connecticut, you are required to have 10% of your housing stock deemed affordable. And that's either by one of three ways, and I go into that in a little bit. How is a house considered affordable? Well, one is that in order for a household to afford to live at that residence, they cannot spend more than 30% of their household income for housing costs. That's mortgage payments, HOA, utilities, you name it. 30% is the max. And in your plan, there's a breakdown based on family size, what those numbers are, both the 80% area median income, which is considered moderately low, 60%, along with what does those housing payments look like for 30%? What can someone afford in order for the house to be considered affordable? And just quick, we use those numbers are based on HUD, the Meriden, New Haven metro area. So I said earlier, there's a slew of ways in our plan. We have the entire matrix of the point system that's based on what's considered affordable and what's not. But long and short of it, there's three areas that if you're going to propose new or create new housing units to count. One is a deed restriction that limits the sale of the property's price based on affordability using those HUD numbers that I referred to earlier, and assuming that they're spending less than 30% or less of their income for housing costs. Next is individuals that receive mortgage assistance, either from USDA loans, Connecticut Finance Housing Authorities, and lastly is rental assistance like Section 8 or other similar state or federal programs. So those are the ways that, a lot of the go into the calculation of whether a house is considered affordable. So every year, the Connecticut Department of Housing puts out the affordable housing appeals list. Cheshire falls in the healthy 3.81%. We're below the 10% that's required on 830G. However, that's what's here. But as you can see, we have individuals either receiving rental assistance, USDA or Connecticut Finance Authority loans, and then you have a few deed restricted units in the town. So as much as it sounds like we're not at the 10%, we have affordable housing that's available currently. And it should just be promoted that that's out there.
Is it what do you mean by available?
So one is if you have individuals that are receiving USDA loans, for example, they are they could be 80% or lower, the area median income, that's their salaries. And the home price is affordable for them to purchase and be approved for that loan. So we get points for those. And that's a difficult one because that's really people oriented. It's not a regulatory thing because under fair housing, you can't regulate by who lives there. But when people like that move into town that qualify for those loans, or a Connecticut Finance Authority loan where they will provide down payment assistance for an individual, that's another way we get points. And that's not adding new housing units that are deed restricted. Those are adding people that qualify based on their incomes.
But in terms of availability, is there housing stock in town for people in that?
Just Mike, There's some housing stock that would fall, if we just go a numbers game, yes, there is a portion of your existing housing stock that's not deed restricted right now that falls under the affordable prices as outlined before, what I said about using 30% and, falling their income levels. But the only reason why we don't get points for that is either A, it's not deed restricted, or the individuals that reside at those properties do not have USDA loans, do not receive rental assistance, or they didn't have a Connecticut Finance Authority loan. That's really the thing. So how do you get those units to count? Sometimes it's outlined later in the plan on kind of goals. That could be something of educating the real estate community to say, there are options out there to get financing for people that we get points, and our number then increases without adding more housing units in town.
I guess the question I'm at, if I wanted to find a rental in Cheshire that falls within the affordable range for families.
Could you just turn the mic?
Would I be able to find one easily?
Well, I mean, it just, the only issue right now with the rental market, it may be difficult just because of the current state of the rental market in the New Haven metro area. But there are some out there, for example, for the affordables, the properties that are managed by the Housing Authority. You have those are affordable. Hazel Drive, which they filed for the demolition permit. They have their building permits under review. That's the affordable housing development that you approved. Was it middle of last year? That's moving forward. I mean, they're moving forward on their permits. So that's a rental that would be out there. If East Mitchell is approved, there's more affordable house. I don't want to talk about East Mitchell though, but just as another example. So there's stuff out there that could be considered affordable. But the other thing too is finding individuals that qualify based on the salaries. If you go to, and I'll just maybe jump out of the presentation if that's all right, and into the affordable housing plan on page 7. This chart here outlines kind of what's the salaries, and it's based on household size. So it's also finding people that meet those salary restrictions, either 60 or 80%, which is that's kind of the other the difficulty of affordable housing as defined by 830G. Because also remember, we're stuck by the statute definition of what's considered affordable.
Do we have any information on vacancy rates?
I could reach out and see if I get that from the Housing Authority, et cetera. My guess is they're running at either 100% or in the high 90s right now. Just like I said, because it's a sign of the times right now of the real estate market. Yeah.
If I might add, I think what Michael is touching on too is that we don't have rentals. There's no apartments, but a lot of condos and small homes would qualify if they just got the right kind of loans to buy them. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. And that's next time. That's the difficulty of trying to get some of your existing housing stock. The plan I wrote in Simsbury was the same sort of issue. How do you get property that probably qualifies based on the price to be considered affordable, when in reality, if we just do numbers, it meets, and it comes down to the occupants. So really, it's a public education with the real estate market to say there are ways out there to make this quote unquote count as affordable beyond the price, and that's an education.
And a lot of and from my personal experiences, so if someone buys a condo in Cheshire or a small house or affordable house, and they get a we used to call it CHFA loans, that's CHFA or CF, whatever it is, that would count towards affordable housing.
Correct.
In my personal experiences, the CHFA loans put a lot of pressure on the seller because they would have to go through a much more rigorous inspection. And there was a lot more criteria to get that CHFA loan to a point where it wasn't even worth applying.
So Yeah, what'll happen with the Chaffel loans, for example, say it's a home that's older, it's pre-1970.
Yep,
They're-
which
they're
a lot of
gonna do-
houses are.
They're going to do the requirement that inspection be performed, if there's any lead paint in the house.
Asbestos, lead abatement.
And then you have to abate it, and then that's exactly usually what kills these deals.
Mm-hmm.
But that's also a state issue.
Bingo.
So, I mean, really, like I said earlier, we're kind of stuck with the definition from statute, and you know, you have to unfortunately do this. This is kind of a broken statute. I mean, that's my commentary. That's not the commission, you know, taking that stance, but it's unfortunate. We're stuck by that right now. This is the box we have to operate under.
In the box that we have to operate under, pretty much the only way we can grow the affordable housing stock is basically by approving tenants and rentals and that type of thing.
Well, it would be deed restricted units. So it could be ownership or rental. So, you know, you could be a single family subdivision that the 20% of the housing stock is deed restricted, or it's rentals. I mean, it's 50-50. And in the sense of deed restrictions, there's no separation between rental and ownership. It's just still deed restriction.
And what does the deed restriction have to say?
So basically what happens is when you have a deed restricted unit, for example, Hazel Drive.
Mhm.
Hazel Drive did a affordable housing plan, which said, you know, you're restricting X amount of units.
A deed restriction on the owner of the complex, basically.
So
Right.
they developed, you know, the deed restriction applies that those units, whenever they go to rent to someone, they have to demonstrate that those individuals qualify based on the income numbers. And those income numbers fluctuate, so they could be up or down at any time. Those rates are set by those numbers whenever they go to rent the unit out.
Right.
They don't have to do annual certifications, the individuals residing there. So if they get a job advancement, raises, et cetera, that's fine. The only issue is when they go in, when a new tenant comes in and it's a deed restricted unit, just like a house, for the period of 30 years, this applies, that
Right.
look back.
Right.
And and in their affordable housing plan, they're required to report annually to the town. So they'll say, like, we had 7 turnovers of tenants. Here's the verifications that we did. We're maintaining our conditions of approval. And that goes as long as the deed restriction's in place. But like I said, eventually, after 30 years, it sunsets. So, and that's just like an 830G too. So your reg 44A falls a lot of the same standards that are outlined in 830G.
When you talked about our existing homes that are here, and if they just went for a USDA loan or whatever, and then made that affordable to count against our 10%, are they subject to deed restrictions also?
No.
They're not. So
No.
if they want to turn around and sell that property
'Cause
for 3
it's-
times what they paid for,
It's
they're
specific to the individual.
okay.
The individual has to apply for that type of loan.
I understand that could be a problem because of what you could go through the house, but I was just curious, like, you might not want to do that because what if your property values go up and then you're stuck selling the house for whatever you bought it for?
And every realtor on the planet that I know of shies their customers away from those loans because the process is prolonged.
Long for them to sell.
It's a rigorous inspection. There's additional burdens on the seller. Realtor, you go to a realtor and say, I think I'll get a Chaffel loan. They'll sit there for 10 minutes, talk you out of it. And then that's part of the broken system that needs to be
Yeah.
fixed.
Michael, how do we find out how many Chaffel loans or USDA loans are in town?
You actually have that data from the Department of Housing. So let me go back to the
I'm
slide.
saying, but is that something, I know that we have it, but is that something regularly that they supply to us?
So the Department of Housing updates those numbers on an annual basis. So that's how they'll not only that, the town has to report if we add any deed restricted units, anyone that may be receiving rental assistance, Section 8, et cetera, like through the Housing Authority, for example, or just in general, if someone rents out their house and it's Section 8 approved, they have to report those numbers to the state. Well, that all goes to the Department of Housing and goes towards our 10%. So that 3.8, let's just say next year, 15 additional households qualify based on their loans. That 3.8 can go to 3.9, or it could be 4.1%. But also, here's the catch. As you approve market rate units, so as you approve another subdivision that's market rate, your total number of houses go up. So your quote unquote affordable pool will go down because you're saying now, let's say you have 397 units that are shown on this, and now you have 16,000 households. We don't have that kind of increase, but yeah, that number then fluctuates based on the total number of houses in the state. And that's, in all honesty, I don't mean to give too many opinions on this. That's what's wrong with 830J, because it's really, unfortunately, for communities such as Cheshire, the previous community I worked for, we're behind the eight ball, and we probably never will reach the 10%. I mean, that's realistic, and we're kind of penalized for that. The best thing we can do is we're going to put an honest effort forward, and that's what this plan is. It's putting some ideas together that are just creative to say, can we add more affordable housing? Are we going to dictate that it's only affordable housing that comes time? No, we can't do that. But we're trying to put any effort possible, and I was trying to put in some creative ideas. So, yeah.
But in order to do that, we'd have to be more aggressive with the high density. Because the only way to do it really is in high density areas.
So, yeah, well, I mean, that's something to talk about, and what basically, so your section 44A of the zoning regulation is what's called an inclusionary zoning reg, where you're required that a certain percentage of the housing stock is set aside as affordable. There's also through inclusionary zoning, you can give density bonuses, similar to what you're saying, going, well, you can have a denser development because we're getting affordable housing units out of this development, which have to be deed restricted. But then the developer gets the bonus to say, well, I'm building additional market rate units to balance the carry costs for those deed restricted units, which may be difficult to sell. And that's also in the plan. I discussed that on inclusionary zoning, referring to 82I of the general state statutes, and pointing out we do have an 82I, an inclusionary zoning regulation in town, and do we want to look at it again, or is there anything that may be hindering for any other developments pursued in town? It's just food for thought. I actually, you laugh at this. I actually have a phone call into someone to ask for that exception. Why not? Why not? Because since we have to be a host community for this, and technically they're.
You got to be careful. That might be a very expensive roof over their head.
Yeah. But regardless, it's actually a valid question, because 830G is silent on how that is treated. And I mean, yeah, well, I mean, you think of it, you have Summers, Montville, East Lyme, and Cheshire as like I'm trying to put like similar communities. All of us are in the same boat. We're all about 3%, if not lower. So with having that facility in town, one, it takes up a large chunk of your town. Then two, you have a captive audience that's living in affordable housing for all if you think of it. They have limited economic means, and housing is provided to them. So, I would say it's, like I said, I've actually tried to reach out to try to get an opinion on that from someone at the Department of Housing. I know Gary in East Lyme, and he's tried for several years to try to ask the same thing. Yeah, well, I'll connect with Gary again, because now we have something in common.
And they no longer count for
Voting purposes. Yep. So I'm just really going to briefly go through how do we meet the goals. And I already kind of hit on a few. Continue practice of inclusionary zoning regulations. That's just section 44A. Consider a payment in lieu fee of affordable units. So like, let's say you propose a market rate subdivision. You have to pay a fee for affordable housing, or it could be assessed to building permits or zoning permits. Everyone pays, like, let's say $20. It goes into a housing trust fund, of which the town can use for the development and promotion of affordable housing units anyone who applies, period. So I'll give you an example. The town of New Canaan does this. They assess a fee of, I think it's up to $100 now. They're really aggressive with this. Every time someone applies for administrative zoning permit, so it's a zoning permit with your building permit, you have to pay this fee. It goes into a housing trust fund. What they did with the funds that were raised from this is that they actually expanded their housing authority property with the funds without going to state grants. So it's other creative things that's also allowed under 8-2I of the general state statutes and inclusionary zoning. You can do regulations or you can do a fee. Either way, the goal is figuring out creative ways to add affordable housing units. Continue to collaborate with other organizations, identifying opportunities, and promote and support the elderly tax relief program. The town already has one. It's a little tough to find on the website. It's just also saying like, we have this option for individuals who want to stay in their home and make it affordable, because I know we're looking at adding quote unquote affordable units in town, but at the same time, it's also letting like senior citizens the ability to age in place. So any kind of economic assistance, which you already have a program that does that, maybe getting the word out that that program is out there to the population that it's supposed to benefit from. I already talked about educating real estate agents on the finance options that are available. And lastly, it's just a creative idea on tax sales. When we have a tax sale, maybe tie a lien to it not a lien, I'm sorry, a deed restriction that it's the property becomes subject to a 30-year affordable housing income restriction. Now, what that does is, one, when there's a tax sale, they only go for the price of the taxes that are due. Two, so in other words, you can get a house probably for $50,000, $60,000. At least then we're kind of creating a way, an avenue for another way that someone could purchase a home that's considered affordable, that goes towards our quota, and it's not adding new homes in town. So I just wanted,
Did we do that to the homes? Was there one or two homes at East Mitchell that weren't those taxed?
I can make sure that they were, but yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff that I put in the regs.
If the house goes into foreclosure for tax liens, that would automatically go into that affordable housing bracket. So the person that buys that house could only sell it for a certain amount.
They're already, like I said earlier, they're already getting a reduced rate. They're not
Yeah,
paying a
so-
whole.
But that's an excellent idea, because now you're actually, every time that happens, you're buying into that.
Doesn't the town of Cheshire sell its tax liens to a third party
They do.
and get paid for it? So they would have to change the way the town collects.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's an idea.
Yeah.
And I know that's
It's a good
something we.
It's a good idea.
Now you're bringing in stock at a different perspective. Instead of us trying to get like a landowner to sell at a discount rate, you have something that's into foreclosure. Now it's able to be purchased, and now it's going to be for a lower price. That works.
Yeah, but there's a problem with that too, because he'd have to have the lawyer look into that. Because foreclosing on a house, the town's not supposed to own property.
Well, they wouldn't.
We wouldn't own it.
It would just, when it was sold,
Yeah,
the deed would have a deed restriction on it. They could only be sold as a affordable home.
oh yeah, well, they can do that,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's what I'm saying. Not the town would own it. But
Oh,
when that is
okay,
sold,
all right.
that would be the restriction of the property. So
And that restriction would be on the sales price?
Correct.
Or-
So that would run with that property for 30 years. So for example, you couldn't then, let's say you picked up that tax sale and you said, hey, I'm going to fix this up and flip it and make 4 times. You couldn't do that. You're limited to, let's say we put it so it has to be affordable to the 80% AMI, area median income.
$200,000 house is now 164 or something or whatever.
And you know what, maybe for the next meeting, I could just, because I know the chair mentioned earlier, want to keep it open. I can show you based on 830G how that breakdown of prices, how it occurs. Because statute explains how we're supposed to calculate it. And when you get an affordable housing plan, usually they provide it. But I think maybe just to see the numbers, it would make sense.
Is there any backfire with that plan as far as foreclosure staying empty and blight and
No, it's
not being
this.
picked up, because then you can't flip it?
It's this.
Buy-
yeah, but it's like you can flip it. You're not like. I mean, that's the thing.
Right. And then, is there any restrictions
No, so the deed restriction would just be, it didn't matter what the means would be for the finance for the individual. They can get any kind of loan. What it would just be is specifically, they have to provide their income information and would be certified by, a plan administrator that, yes, this individual qualifies, the household income will not exceed whatever the 80% AMI is. And then the other thing too is like what I said earlier, that your utility costs, HOA, other things go into this. It's not just, what are you paying for your mortgage? That's why when they say housing costs, it's everything. And I think maybe if that's okay with the commission, I'll bring that for the next meeting. And I don't know if you want to include that in your plan also, maybe just that calculation. I know I put the household incomes, I put what 30% looks like, but what does that look like for a price of a house?
I know back years and years ago, when Harvey Waller did the subdivision at Lost Farms Village, you guys remember that? Lost Farms Village? He had to have a couple affordable housings in the subdivision, and he did that. But those houses really, it wasn't that drastic of a price change, but it still was in the neighborhood. So it was like you had people that like had a more affordable home, but it was still in the neighborhood with other houses.
Yeah, but it's not. The home is exactly the same. It can't be any different than any of the rest of the homes there. But what they get is the density, so that's why they make the money.
So
That's
the
what
other-
he did down there.
Yeah, because the outside, you're supposed to.
You can't tell any. There should be
You're
no
supposed
difference.
to, if you had a distribution plan here, you should be able to basically leave it on the counter, go out to the site, and you wouldn't be able to tell which one is the affordable unit, which one's not. Usually what happens, the interior finishes are different inside of the house, but outside looks exactly the same.
We did it for your namesake, Strollo Court. We did it for any affordable housing subdivision that we've had. That's what it is, and they get a density requirement. And I'm trying to think of another one that we've done, but definitely Strollo Court was.
We used to have a program with the prison, they would rent the houses on the property at below market rate to state employees. They would pay like $1 a month, $2 a month. There was a scandal with it, the state stopped that, but if the state were to use that could free up a bunch of properties.
That's a good goal to include, coordinate with the state about reinstituting that program. If the commission's okay, I'll add that to the plan. Yeah, they still have several.
Town managers to the state.
Yeah, well, the problem is they were not paying the utility bills and they weren't doing what they were supposed to do. They had to do like mostly the state cops and they
The prison
provided
was-
security, but the scandal was they weren't even paying the utility bills and so they stopped the program, but they could reinstitute the program, that could throw us a bunch of houses right on top.
I think the prison had people that worked at the prison lived in all those houses. Yeah,
But under old law, the warden used to have to live on the
he did. Yeah. Mike mentioned having this meeting again. I talked to Mr. Bowman last week, and he does have some comments he wants to put into this. So I felt no reason why we have to not do this one more time. So he could speak. Is this considered training for that? Could you sign off on that? Not. It might be, right?
We can talk. There could be creative ways how this will count.
I'm learning a lot tonight.
So I'll put a lot of statute out. Yeah, I mean, and I don't know if anyone has any other comments or questions you want to see in the plan or any comments on the plan itself. I know we did this for the public, but.
They're
Commission
all
have
home
anything?
watching. And they know there'll be another one at our, is it going to be after our end of our next meeting? Do we have enough time to do it then?
Yeah, we
Right.
could.
So if they know, then if anyone wants to show up, it'll be at, what is our next meeting? April
11th.
April 11th. We'll be doing this workshop again on the affordable housing if anyone is out there listening. No other questions for Mike? No? Okay. Anything else? No. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Mr. Kaderis, seconded by
Second.
Mr. Natale. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Thanks, everyone.